All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Major Bauman. I am the logistics officer up here at District. Before I get started, I want to introduce a couple key personnel that you may or may not interact with throughout your time here, but it's just good to put a face to a name. So I'll start off with Gunnar Menchaca. He is the District Logistics Chief. So he's primarily going to be working with your log chiefs at the RS, but when it comes to primarily vehicles, but even some of the supply kind of procurements and assisting with some of that, he's going to be the face behind a lot of those actions. Second is going to be Julius Cromati. Mr. Cromati runs all the facility stuff, so we'll talk about that. But any kind of relocations, any structured things that turn into the bringing up of a facility or the transition of a facility, that's going to be your point man. And then Mr. Bob Sanders, he runs all the ATFP mission assurance stuff. So anything that has to do with ballistic panels, general security, if you're having issues with a facility's ability to lock and secure and provide general safety for your Marines at that location, it's going to largely tie into his realm. Okay, so those are the faces and the names with my shop. And then we've got a couple clerks who manage the details when it comes to vehicles. Overall, I have a great team up here. What I constantly preach and what we all buy into is that we are a customer service based entity. And so we serve you guys. And I'll hit it a couple times, but a lot of times we don't know what y'all need if it doesn't get fed to us. And I'm primarily talking to the XOs here. But your log chiefs and the XOs are the ones who kind of either tell us or don't tell us what you need. And so we feed based off of that. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the overview for today is here, right? So there's really going to be three categories that I'm going to harp on and spend the most time on, and that's going to be the ATFP mission assurance. We're going to hit up on fleet management and vehicles and just kind of understanding that and what you can do to manage that, and then the facilities, what all goes into it. They're pretty in-depth topics. I'm going to try to hit the wave tops just to give you an understanding of how they work and the role you play. And what that looks like, and then we'll close out with just kind of some wave top on some of the things. Okay. All right. And before we get started, I'll just say I recognize the human factors. I recognize I'm the last class of the day. I do have about 36 slides. However, I'm going to try to crunch it down to about 30 minutes just to give you what you need. Okay. So bear with me, and we'll get through this. Okay, so already talked to the structure here, those names and points of contact as listed, and again, the primary areas of responsibility that we have are facilities, ATFP, government vehicles, and overall safety. A lot of those interweave with each other, but you can see our structure there and just kind of the purpose of what we do and how we serve you guys. So starting off with ATFP, okay, so Mr. Bob Sanders kind of serves as the district officer. He's also the liaison between the security needs that you guys have and your recruiters depend on, and all of the law enforcement agencies that exist in the community or the communities of your stations, and interacts with them on your behalf. All right. Overall, when you're looking at the RS, the biggest thing that provide direct and immediate protection for you guys is going to be those ballistic panels. And there's some pictures in here that we'll cover down here in a second. But historically and sadly, there are accounts, Chattanooga being the prime example of, as recruiters, they can and have before been targeted by extremists and violent actors. So we try to curb against that with a couple things, ballistic panels being the primary one. With suspicious activity reports, this is something that primarily is driven and facilitated by the XOs, all right? And so there is ATFP, specifically ATR, anti-terrorism representative training that everyone who's required to have should already have by now. And that training kind of educates you on what those requirements are. And so the SAR form shouldn't be new as far as concept goes for those who need to know. But just understand that any property damage that is related to either theft or criminal activity, and then vandalism is something we see a lot. Houston is getting a lot of attention in that regard. But any of those categories would trigger a SAR. And really, you just once that gets filled out with the 5 Ws and the ancillaries on that form, Bob takes care of that and then works with the law enforcement in the local area to assist as able. And then just really the foot stomper here is the time sensitivity to the reporting. Okay, it doesn't help anybody to report something 2 days, 3 days later if you can help it, right? So immediate reporting within 24 hours is the scripted requirement. So just make sure that when something happens, your recruiters understand they need to report as soon as possible, and then you take that information and route that up as quickly as you can as well. So, and just like anything else, typically what you see in the fleet is if there's an emergency or an action that does need immediate attention, blasting off a WARNA with just the 5 Ws at least preps us to receive that if you need a little bit more time to work on the SAR, okay? But again, Bob Sanders is going to be your point of contact to clarify that, and just understanding quick and clear communication is going to be everybody's friend in this environment. Here's an example of the ballistic panels. I show you both of these because about a decade ago there was a transition of the ballistic panel types that existed. We are slowly shifting towards the Army Corps of Engineer version, but point being is as you go out and see your facilities, you're going to see 2 different types. They serve the same purpose. They have the same Kevlar internal ballistic penetration mechanisms, and so there's no difference, but just for your visual reference there. And the key point I'm just showing you this for is that the panels inside these weigh a couple hundred pounds. So trying to move them is not only challenging, but has got some safety concerns. We've had people pinch fingers, pinch toes in trying to move these things. So it can be done, but just recognize that it needs to be done smartly. Question? Sir,
once we order those, how long does it typically take to get them to the RSS?
Yeah, it's a good question. So because it is a national contracted procurement, and the vendor that supplied us for a long time, right now the turnaround time is it's kind of TBD, to be honest. So I can't give you a number. We don't have it. So if there are panels that you have that are missing, right? If you've got a facility that's missing panels, in fact.
Or like a new RSS.
Yeah, so a brand new station. So MCRC is tracking the new RSSs that are popping up that aren't matching up with the procurement pipeline. So we understand that. And this will kind of help demonstrate my answer to your question. So, right, thinking fields of fire, going back to like a fire plan sketch here, the purpose of the panel is to provide a defilade for your recruiter in case there is a live fire going on, right, and they're being targeted. There's multiple layers in which we try to protect the recruiters. The perforated film that goes on the outside that also serves as an advertisement also serves as a visual dissolvent for anybody trying to look inside the facility. So that's kind of like barrier number 1. The physical barrier that is established by the ballistic panels sets, but if you don't have enough panels for everybody in your office, right, per the book, every recruiter should get their own ballistic panel. If you don't have that, let's say you have 2 out of the 3 that you require, you can maneuver and position those panels to maximize their defilade. So we have some facilities that because they don't have enough to block every single desk, they've actually moved them up to the windows so that everybody benefits from that protection. It's not ideal, but it's understood that you're doing with what you have, while we at the district level work out the details of getting the Marines what they need. Doesn't quite answer your question, but does that help?
It does, sir.
Okay, so for you specifically and for anybody else, if you've got ballistic panels that are in need, get me a quantity, or rather get Bob a quantity and what location that's at, and then we'll either make sure it's already tracked on our discrepancy tracker, or that we include that as we work with MCRC for the new contract that they're working through. Okay, any questions off of ballistic panels or what their intent is? Okay, so still on mission assurance here. For emergency requirements, an emergency action plan is required at each RS. And that emergency action plan is expected to be pushed down to the substations and understood and rehearsed on a quarterly basis, okay? What that looks like and how you decide to do that is on you. There's no scripted emergency action plan that's given by district. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It needs to meet the intent of there's an emergency that happens, everybody understands what the plan is, and everybody is capable of executing that plan to get them to that either said location or in a position where they're protected from that harm. Okay. Some of the items that we have inside the facility to assist those emergency situations is the Davy bar. So some of you may have already seen that, but that is essentially for any door that swings internal to the building or to the room is meant to be like a massive door stopper, right? So using the fork top to run up underneath the doorknob, and then it stubs up against the floor, and that provides a layer it buys you some time and a layer of protection. The medical trauma kits are issued out to the RSs and the substations, right? The rule of thumb is that every recruiter should have one in their desk, and every recruiter should have one in their vehicle, right? So it's essentially a combat trauma kit, and it just enables the access to those medical needs in a timely fashion. Again, if in doing your site surveys and your site visitations, you realize that some recruiters are missing these, just simply request them. We can put them in order, and we'll get them for you. The last we checked when we did our CIPs last year, I think everybody was in pretty good standing here, and all the requests that were needed were made. But understand that those could easily be procured. The two other components that are more tied to facilities but provide that same type of protection is that remote access entry system. So that is a key coded secure platform. In fact, the Corps of Engineers who installs that when they do the site construction just upgraded to a new electronic version. All the doors of the recruiting station are controlled by magnetic entry, and these systems have done a pretty decent job of ensuring a closed, secure network. Now, they are known to be faulty, and depending on the weather and the conditions, they can be they can have issues. So again, the recruiter just needs to understand that if they've got issues, it just needs to be reported in a timely manner so that we can circle back and get that fixed as quick as possible, especially when it's tied directly to their safety and their security. Another thing that's not mentioned on here, but just with entry access, is that the recruiters they should get by the Corps of Engineers a physical key for their door. If they don't have one and they're able to get one, let myself or Mr. Cormati know, and we can work with the Corps of Engineers to make sure they get a key. Our ultimate goal is to make sure that they have the ability to secure themselves or secure the facility if needed. And then the last thing is the perforated film. I already spoke to that. You know what it looks like, and then now you understand kind of the intent of it. Yes?
Sir, for the trauma kits, obviously they expire. Is there a process for us to get rid of them, or should we just toss them?
To get rid of them, is there a process to that, or?
To get rid of them?
Yeah. I think the only reason they expire is because the adhesive on the bands that are in there. Okay. But most of what's in there is non-perishable items. You've got like an ACE bandage and a couple. There might even be like a H bandage type stuff in there. It's a lot like an IFAC, right? So.
Biggest thing in there's a tourniquet for the bleeder wounds and the bullet chest seal. It goes back to Chattanooga, the CG at the time. If that recruiter that did get shot, if he had taken a chest shot, what do we have in the offices that the recruiters could have done? Nothing sure didn't work, so that's why we have those. But it's the adhesive on the chest seal that expires.
Yep.
Is it, just that as I go through, like there's a lot that are just expired, so I don't know if it's just like just keep requesting.
The last big reorder we did as a district was in 22.
Okay.
And all the offices, went to every RS, how many do you need? 170 went here, 150 went here, whatever your needs were. I know some RSs have, for whatever reason, had to do reorders in between them. I know RS Dallas just did like 120 of them within about the past year. They're getting expensive. But on the cycle, MICRA comes around and puts out their own contract for them, and we pony off that when we can.
Yeah. So like anything else, if you find that you need them, just let us know and we'll work to get them. Yeah. Okay, so Trapwire. This is a mobile app that MICRIC has established as the bona fide method in which we provide emergency notification. Right. So this app is a mass warning notification system. It allows every user to create, send, and receive messages with regards to said name emergency, right? So if there's an active shooter, recruiter at that RSS can blast out a quick 5W message or even just a one sentence. It pings the entire system. There are certain individuals that no matter, so it's based off a 25-mile radius. So everybody in that 25-mile radius will get pinged, whether or not they're part of that command that's tied into Trapwire. There are certain individuals, to include Mr. Sanders and individuals at MCRIC, who will also get pinged, which just ensures that everybody who needs to know is tracking that situation, and those in the vicinity are given proper awareness. And then it also provides accountability, right? So I believe quarterly we will do test runs on the Trapwire app, and when that gets sent out by Mr. Sanders, everybody gets a message. You have to open the phone in order to acknowledge it, and there's like a couple verification steps to ensure that one, you receive it, two, you acknowledge it, and the system it checks you off is accountable, right? So it's a pretty effective system when it's done well, and there are some. We're struggling through it on the user side of the house, which Mr. Sanders does a great job of pushing out the emails. But just understand the XOs are primarily who he's going to be working with to ensure that and drive that function. So just be prepared for that. And then the big thing here is just knowing that if you have a government cell phone, we prefer it to be on your government cell phone, just because that's what MCRIC has deemed is necessary for you. But this app can also be found on your personal phone and can be utilized there as well. Whatever phone you use and you primarily utilize, there's nothing against you having them on both either. But just one of your phones at a minimum needs to have that Trapwire app and the account, and it needs to be kept live. Okay. Ensure that you have location services on always. A lot of times we have users who will log in but not allow it to track your GPS, and so as soon as they log out of the app, they kind of disappear on the map, and that's not very helpful. And then it prevents their phone from getting pinged and stuff like that because they can't dictate the 25-mile radius detection. Notification banners, obviously awareness. The whole purpose of it is to keep you aware of any emergencies, and so opening up all those settings enables that, right? Okay. All right, any questions off of Force Protection, ATFP? Yes.
Just a quick question. With respect to the program management, is there any requirement for a TCCC CLS certification to be done annually? So I can only imagine like the admin warriors out there who have to touch the tourniquets and CT wouldn't know what to do.
No, so he's asking if there's any requirement for there to be like tourniquet training or any like training for the med kit usage.
I mean, there's a video on kind of how to employ the thing. That we have tourniquet trainers, but again, it goes back to, it's not really dictated, at least in the mission assurance order, how the RSs conduct that training.
Yeah.
I don't know.
If that is something that you and your command has a concern over, there's nothing saying you can't do a refresher tourniquet application class during all hands training or Friday, whatever that looks like. You guys can own how you solve that problem, but to answer your question, no, there's no requirement for TCCC or anything prior to owning, using, or being responsible for this program.
Thanks, sir.
Okay. All right, so getting into fleet management. Now we're talking vehicles, okay? So this is generally, now we're talking GSA. And GSA is the primary vendor in which we procure vehicles from. Unfortunately, like every other government program, it's very slow, it's very tedious, and things don't come very quickly. But just so you can see the chain of command, we sit in the middle as a provider to you guys at the RS level. And then the log chiefs at each of the RSs help supplement the needs for the recruiters and then feed back up those requirements so that we can talk to the FSRs and the GSA representatives up at MCRIC. Okay. So the operator responsibility, to keep it super simple, it's just like if you borrowed your grandpa's Bentley and he was letting you use it for the weekend, like, right, you would keep that thing clean, you would make sure it didn't get scratched, you'd drive it safely. It's all the same thing. Just be a good steward of the vehicles we give you. That's really what it boils down to. But the foot stomper is, I'm telling you guys this, when really it's the recruiters who are driving more than you are. So making sure that same message is conveyed down to the recruiters and that they understand that them taking care of their vehicle extends the life of that thing, right? Them paying attention to their driving and not getting into preventable accidents is helpful for us to not only maintain the vehicle, but as soon as you get into an accident, which we'll get in here in a minute, you lose that asset. And it's not like we have one parked out here that we can give you the very next day. The process of getting that vehicle replaced or not having a vehicle while that thing is in the shop is the length of time that recruiter is going to be without a vehicle. And the way that we see it, right, the computer the vehicle, his cell phone, and a facility are really the TO weapons for the recruiters out there. So if you take any of those away, it's really, really challenging for that Marine to do his job. And so we want to make sure that we're taking care of those things so that they have those things and they kind of protect those as their assets. But going into it, right, there's a statement of understanding that just acknowledges, hey, I've got a government vehicle, I'm taking care of it. There's a little bit of training that is required from the operators. Now, I will tell you that district, as of right now, does not dictate that every recruiter be assigned a vehicle, right? So like vehicle A doesn't have to go to recruiter Sergeant Smith. Instead, it could be kind of a pool of vehicles, and then recruiters use that as needed. There's pros and cons to that method, right? You don't have as much buy-in to care for the vehicles if I'm not assigned to it. It's hard to have accountability to a vehicle that gets damaged if you can't recall or you can't trace who was using that vehicle at the time. So it's up to the command on how they want to do that. But just understand that there's pros and cons to both those options. Regardless, every driver that is going to operate a government vehicle needs to have a valid driver's license. We'll fill out the statement of understanding, and then depending on their age, the driver awareness, and the quiz that's associated with that training, right? So it's not much different than the fleet, except they're just going to be driving a lot more than they would in the fleet. Obvious compliance with all the state and government laws. The district orders, we're currently in the process of revamping a district order for how to operate a government vehicle. And it's vague in a lot of categories, but it should provide some left and right lateral limits for you guys as you dictate how you want to manage your fleet. And then just kind of like with the facilities, if a recruiter has a vehicle issue, whether it's a check engine light that comes on, or they blow a tire, or they get into a minor accident, timely reporting of those situations in which they need help or they need the RS to step in and speed up the process of that recovery is going to depend on how quickly they report that, right? I've only been here for a little over a year, and already there's been numerous events where we were reported an accident on Monday morning and the accident happened 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. Like, that doesn't help anybody, and it actually makes it more difficult for the recruiter to get what they need because we've got to buy back some of that time, and it kind of puts us in a pinch to help buy you any favors with GSA. Okay. All right, so real briefly, I want to talk through the vehicle procurement process and what does that look like, okay? So your ROP is going to be dictated off of how many recruiters you have, right? So if you've got, 200 recruiters underneath that are on ROP for your RS, then you at a minimum rate those 200 vehicles for those recruiters that are canvassing. The district rates a certain number of vehicles for certain billets and functionalities, and that's kind of where it caps, right? So you're already given a formulated batch of vehicles. If for some reason you, in a 2-month period, damage or need to repair 10% of that fleet, then you're kind of stuck because now you've got a gap in otherwise your mode of transportation that you need. So your options are to do a short-term rental, which has its costs associated. But that's a quick fix, right? That's literally getting a short-term rental, usually done at about 90 days at a time, and that just kind of puts a Band-Aid on the bleeding wound while you're waiting for a vehicle to get fixed in the shop because you had a blown transmission or whatever. So that is an option, but just understand there's a cost associated. The customer acquisition process is an annual process in where each vehicle, when given to us, tries to be as new and low mileage as possible. So when GSA gives us vehicles, they want us to get as much life out of it as possible. Once a vehicle hits about 100,000 miles or 10 years in age, and that varies a little bit depending on the make and model, it is up, 5 years in age. It ends up hitting a threshold where that vehicle can be traded in for a newer, younger vehicle. Okay, so this CAM cycle, which is primarily managed by your log chiefs, there's an opportunity for you to kind of do some exchange and keep your fleet fresh and young and viable. Okay, so and then the last one is the additional vehicle request. So if you rate 80 vehicles, but because of ROP changes, next year you're going to need another 10 to match your ROP, you can request additional vehicles to ride and match that rising tide. Okay. So you don't need to know details about this, just understand that those are the ways in which you can get vehicles. That's how it's calculated for you, and that's how we can help you feed your fleet and make sure your recruiters have those vehicles they need. And here again, the XOs are primarily the ones who work with the log chiefs to kind of see this and calculate the deficiencies and report that up to us so that we can help you guys get that. I will say, for the past year that I've been here, it has been about an 18-month turnaround from requesting a vehicle from GSA, particularly additional vehicles, to actually delivering those vehicles to your parking lot. I foot stomp that because right now there's nothing I can do about that timeline. I also foot stomp it because it shows you when there's these big giant wheels that turn really slowly, and from request to bang, it's 18 months. There is a deeper down the pipe and some forethought that needs to go into as ROP changes, right? And we're thinking with an operational mind. Don't forget that there are logistical requirements tethered to those adjustments, right? So when we talk about structure, when we talk about FY25 and FY26 type things, don't forget the facilities, ballistic panels, and vehicles need to be in that thought process because the request timeline is about that same time. And so we've got to request that stuff out earlier, okay? Okay, any questions on that piece of vehicles? All right, so I'm gonna breeze through this, but just so you're tracking, no pun intended, each vehicle has a tracking mechanism in it called Geotab. It's a GPS system that gets plugged into the vehicle, and it provides some diagnostics on that vehicle. Everything from vehicle engine efficiency to GPS routing. It tracks hard brakes, hard turns, hard stops, when the vehicle turns on and turns off. The system captures all of those elements, and so that you can go back and see what a recruiter was doing on a certain day, or if they're en route somewhere, you could kind of see all of those things. The biggest thing that Geotab has really helped us with, and again, we're trying not to micromanage them, but because speed is often associated with safety, particularly when it comes to vehicle accidents, there's not a governor on the engine, but there is a trip on the Geotab that pings the vehicle when they cross over 75 miles an hour. So just make sure the recruiters know that 75 miles an hour is the limit before Geotab pings them. So whether they need to plan their trips accordingly, just recognize that hits the system. Additionally, the system in which Geotab is tracked, everybody has transparency on. So the RS can see it, and they can see the same information that we can see. So when we pull that information, we're all looking at the same data. I'm going to breeze through this, but just to give you an idea, so you can assign recruiters to vehicles if needed, if that's the route you decide to go. You can pull an asset roster, so if you want to look at the 50 vehicles you have, it can be broken down. It'll show you the assigned drivers, and it'll show you the odometer of that vehicle, and that's helpful because when we talk about that CAM cycle and you want to look at your older vehicles and you want to categorize them and start prepping them for turn-in and reset, you can work with your log chief to kind of do some analysis here and prime the pump before we get into that CAM cycle season. And then just when we talk about the tracking aspect of it, again, per vehicle you can see the stats on when it comes to violations, but then also what you can't see here is addresses, time hacks, coordinates, and then routes on the map that enable you to look at that. And I'm not forecasting any taboo here, but particularly like this comes helpful if there's ever like investigations and it involves a vehicle, which does happen occasionally. So just knowing how to use this, understanding that this type of information and data is there, can be helpful for you as a command team. Okay, so getting into vehicle accidents, right? Reporting and processes, foot stomp again, timely reporting is going to make all the difference. So just make sure recruiters know they should not be afraid to report an accident. We're not trying to find out who's at fault. We're trying to just make sure that vehicle gets repaired as quickly as possible and back in the hands of the recruiter. And there's 4 categories of vehicle damages occurring that need repair. Okay, so gov at fault, civ at fault, active nature, right? Whether it's hail, could be weather related, could be there was a deer ran out in front of the road and they hit the deer, whatever it is, and then vandalism. So those are the categories in which we put the vehicle so that we can budget, but then also act appropriately and communicate to GSA what that is. The required documents, it's not much different than the fleet, right? The SF91 and SF94 are required just to document that accident and that event with that vehicle. The flash report, The police report, if you're able to get it. Some police departments in certain areas are really difficult to work with, and so we don't have to have the police report, but it is helpful, particularly when it's a civet fault. It's helpful to have that police report as we work with GSA to either get a replacement or provide funds for that repair. And then photographs. If the recruiter just needs to know, like, hey, if there's an accident, no matter whose fault it is, take pictures of that damage so that we can start leaning into what that is going to look like. And then once the accident's kind of happened and all this has been reported, then we get into the actual management of that vehicle. And so there are three, I'm drawing a blank on the term, but quotes that need to be had from local repair shops, right? So if your Toyota Camry just got hit by a deer, you want to get 3 quotes from local shops that can do the repair, and then with those 3 quotes, supply up your district and working with your log and supply chief down at the RS, we'll figure out what the best COA is for pricing, and then we'll tell you which one to go with and get those repairs done. The quicker we can do that, the quicker we get to the shop and get it back out into the hands of the recruiter. Okay. Okay, so I'm talking mostly the exos here. So what I tell the log chiefs down at the RS is that we have a SharePoint tracker on the DHQ share drive or SharePoint that we track all of the accidents on. This is only as good as we get information from the grassroots. So if it's not reported, we don't know what happened. But what we really want to focus on here is following through on the estimate and then the actual cost associated with it. Because what that allows us to do is at the end of the year, when it comes to budgeting and when it comes to looking at trends, we can feed y'all not only information that'll help when it comes to all hands training and maybe how to coach your recruiters when it comes to safer driving or identifying any trends, but also for budgeting, we can adjust, understanding that, hey, those out in the North Texas, New Mexico area have way more vandalism than, say, San Antonio, right? Not the case, but as an example. And we can kind of feed and hedge some of those anticipated actions and costs leaning into the next FY. Okay, so that's why it's important, but we need your log chiefs to be feeding this, and everyone's got access to see this, but just so you know, this type of information is being tracked. Any questions over vehicles? Pretty straightforward. Okay. All right, let's get over facilities. So generally speaking, structure and facility requests come from the RS, right? So you guys crunch numbers, you're looking at how your AO is shaping up, and you determine that you need 2 more PCSs and a new RSS, right? You communicate that up to us, and Mr. Cormati and I sit down, we collect that information, and we put it in a system called RIFMIS. The Army Corps of Engineers is the one who ultimately takes that data and works on getting you that facility you need, right? But we need y'all's information and assessment on what type of facility and where you want it. And so understanding that y'all feed us information and then we action it when it comes to actually working with the Corps of Engineers. Tenant expectations, right? So the recruiters that fulfill the square footage of that facility, it's really no different than the vehicles, right? Take care of the space, treat it well, and not only will you probably make the lesser happy, but you extend the likelihood of keeping that lease in that spot, right? We've got a lot of facilities out there where the recruiters are telling us, hey, this is a great address. We don't want to lose it. We don't want to lose it. And that's great. I'm glad we were able to get you that spot. You can help us by taking care of that space. Don't just, whatever that is, there's a list of examples, but just making sure that they are doing their part to take care of it. The janitorial services that it's part of the contract of the facility come into the facility to vacuum, take out trash, whatever it is, right? So the recruiters should not be doing that. However, and I'll use the PCS down in Kingsville, for example. They're supposed to be getting janitorial services, and they haven't. And when I showed up to inspect them last year, I asked them, hey, how long have you been not getting these services? He's like, sir, I've been here for a year and a half, and I've never seen anybody come in here and clean. That's a problem. It's a problem because that's part of the contract. And but the recruiter, it's helpful for the recruiters to know that that's part of it, and if they don't see that janitorial service, to let us know so that we can enforce it from our level. But the recruiters should not necessarily be cleaning their own space when it comes to vacuuming and stuff like that. The other piece But that's juxtaposed to, hey, take care of your space, right? So if you know you've got some visitors coming in, if you've got some applicants coming in, do the smart thing, take your trash out, right? Don't leave your smelly McDonald's bag there that's gonna foul up the situation. So there's just kind of some common sense there. The cleanliness, the stewardship, talked about that, and then just understanding the RS log chiefs and the Army Corps of Engineers and that lesser relationship does have some impact. So encourage your recruiters to just be polite and professional to everybody who comes in. If they are able to develop a relationship with that lesser, there's nothing saying they can't, and in fact they can often get a quicker response to smaller things like changing out light bulbs or replacing an outlet or something like that if they build that relationship. So they're just recognize that's there. Otherwise, you'll route up that request through us. We'll work with the Corps of Engineers to go with the lesser to go down and fix whatever facility issue it is they have. All right. On the SharePoint, there is a reporting process. We've got a tracker for facility things that need to be fixed, right? Whether it's an HVAC issue, if you got mold in the building, if there's a leak in the roof, whatever it is, using that SharePoint tracker to kind of capture all of that. And then Julius and I monitor that and update that as we communicate with Corps of Engineers and ensure that we're getting as quick and quality-based attention to that as we can. All right, the last thing here is for common issues. Already talked about the lack of timely reporting for anything that they need down there. They just need to recognize our job is to serve y'all, and we don't know that y'all have a problem unless you tell us. So just report in a timely manner. Janitorial service issues, either they're poor services, that they don't know that they're supposed to be getting them. Make sure that they know that, hey, you're supposed to be getting janitorial services, and we can help enforce that to make sure that it's happening because we're paying for the service, so it needs to happen. And then the last thing that we've seen in a trend over the 2 years that I've been here or heard of is the lack of RS leadership going down and visiting the facilities. Now, this is the big thing here too is, and my encouragement to y'all is when you go down to visit that one RSS that's 4 hours away, it may seem like mentally, I'm just asking you that yes, go there and take care of the Marines, check on them and their welfare, but while you're there, do a spot check on the facility. Ask them, hey, is your AC working good? Are there any leaks or any issues? Do you have any bug issues? Does the door lock? Like, just do a quick kind of wave top spot check, and you'd be surprised what the recruiters end up telling you that even we haven't heard of up at our level. So asking some of those basic questions can be helpful to kind of draw out some of the issues that we in fact can action that they just haven't told us. So just be engaged, both on an operational side, but also on the facility side. And then that just reinforces our teamwork as we make sure they got what they need. All right, so just wave top, the categories of facility actions that are done to help make sure the facility is what it needs to be is an upgrade, right? So you need new paint, there's scratches and nicks on the wall, whatever it is, facility upgrade is a category, right? So putting kind of lipstick, new fresh lipstick on that face helps with the whole advertising aspect of it. Expansion, if your ROP is growing, but the walls in that space aren't, right? And you need more space, an expansion is probably your answer, right? You don't want to leave that address, it's a really good spot. Is there an option to break down a wall and build out further? Sometimes the lesser's okay with that, and that's the answer. Sometimes an expansion is you moving next door to a bigger spot. But when you run out of space, expansion is in the question. A relocation. Hey, there's too much crime here. This address is no longer good and viable. The population's moving, whatever it is, we need to relocate this office. That can be a request as well. And then the branding, which is similar to upgrade, but more specific to the MCRIC branding standard that exists. So if anything in there needs to be updated, repainted, if the carpet needs to be replaced because it's 10 years old and there's stains and there's a bald spot or there's a high traffic area, those kind of things we care about. And to us is part of the branding message, and so we want to make sure that's taken care of as well. Common issues, parking. Sometimes there's not enough parking in the front lot, or there's not any parking in the back lot, or some of the adjacent. We've had it to where lessers will, they've taken us on, we've signed a lease, but they don't want any government vehicles parking in their spots, and so we just kind of have to work around that. But those are some of the issues that we run into. So those are your options when it comes to facilities and managing your facilities. All right. This is really high wave top. The only thing I want you to understand is when you're looking at the FY, just recognize that as we get to the end of the fourth quarter, we start collecting from you guys what y'all are wanting to build out for next year, right? So fourth quarter of FY24, we're already talking about FY25 build outs. When that gets collected and turned into MCRIC for action, we're already rolling into the first quarter of the next FY. You won't start to see any of these actions that you put in for 25 until probably about the third quarter of the next year. So just recognize there's about a 12 to 18 month gap between requesting a facility and actually seeing that thing under construction or being complete, right? It varies depending on what kind of construction is being requested, but there's about a 12-month wheel that turns on that. And so when we talk about ROP, projecting next year, projecting the next 24 months, that's why I talk about facilities need to be a part of that calculus. What? All right, what's going on? Stand by. All right, we're almost done with the heavy stuff. Shoot. All right, let's just try to do it this way. Maybe. All right, the only thing I want you to pull out of here is just recognizing that there is a standard branding for your recruiting stations, right? It's helpful for you to know what that is and what that looks like, so that when you go in, you can identify discrepancies. There's a standard paint color on the wall. There's a standard setup or setup type model that's expected. And so, yes, hold your recruiters accountable to that when it comes to all the marketing requirements. But from a facility standpoint, repainting the walls, putting up posters, having the branding and logos on the wall are some of the actions that fall into our lane when it comes to facilities and upgrades. All right, motorcycle mentorship program. It does exist. And if you've got any motorcycle riders, it emulates the same program that exists in the fleet, right? So there's level 1 training that is required for those who don't have a valid state motorcycle license. If they do, level 2 training is the only one required. It needs to be done preferably every year, but every 5 years is when it's required by the Marine Corps. I'm gonna, when we send this out, or if y'all have given access to this, y'all can read this more in detail. But for the sake of time, it's the same program. And if you've got any motorcycle drivers, we've got a policy letter that kind of dictates the left and right lateral limits for that. Any questions on that? Any questions on the facility stuff that we wrapped up all of them? Okay. All right, general safety here. So every RS should have a trained ground safety manager. All right, so typically, right, serves as collateral duty, but there is a ground safety management course that Marine needs to go to, and then once coming back from that, they can supervise and manage all the ground safety requirements for your RS and substations. So if that's not done, put that Marine on track to go to that course. And then this is going to enable you proper management access to the risk management information incident reporting system. So if you're doing pull functions or any other off-site events that require that waiver and that form, that individual is going to be the one to help you with that. Okay, the last thing we got here. So I manage the Commander's Inspector Program, so this is part of why I'm speaking to that, but also the CIP is kind of the complement to the SRI. So that where the SRI focuses on operations and checking all of your operational wickets, I can't speak to that. The CIP is akin to a CGRI, right? So we're coming in and we're looking at all the functional areas. So admin, supply, logistics, comptroller, safety, vehicle management, all those things. We rotate every year, so about every 12 months you'll get inspected. There's a full report that comes back with the corrective action plan requirement out of that. And the whole purpose is really to assess your current situation, make sure you're in compliance with all the orders and directives, and then enhance your position, right? So that's on the job training for those Marines who are holding that functional area. but then also providing them any resources they need to do that job well. The functional areas that we cover inside the logistics is pretty much what we've covered here, right? So ground safety, the motor transport, the fleet aspect of it, mission assurance, and facilities. Pretty simple. There's nothing too crazy about it. If you're doing things right, and if your Marines are asking questions and trying to do things throughout the year correctly, we typically run into zero issues. So nothing to sweat over, but just so you know, there is an inspection program that annually occurs, and you'll expect that. The caveat to that, and this is my last thing, and I'll be done here, is going into FY25, we have cut that inspection schedule in half. I think everybody in here, so Austin will be inspected next year as a cursory, and the schedule was pushed out recently, back in August rather. And so not every RS is going to be inspected this year. If you are being inspected, you can look at previous files to kind of see what was done, look at the trends, and prep for that. But for the next FY, we're only doing half the facilities. So you may not get inspected depending on where you're at. Okay, any questions or comments over anything covered today? Yes, sir.
So we'll talk about the door mechanism to get into RSS.
Yes.
So we have one that's been replaced or fixed rate 3 times.
Okay.
Right? So what happens is it stops working, so the recruiter can't get in or out. Right? It just locks. So they have to leave the back door.
Okay.
So it's been about 3 times already since I've been here. How many times does it have to stop functioning before the Army Corps of Engineers just start putting a Band-Aid on it so we can replace that whole mechanism? How does that work?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I know. I don't know the number of times to answer your question, but we recognize that the control panel for the door entry access they're about to try to fleet out a whole new system that is supposed to be more secure and more user friendly. So if and when that gets installed, it should solve that issue, because I'm assuming you have one of the older models that I depicted earlier.
The one, the exact same one you just showed us, pretty much.
Yeah, so there's a lot of electrical components that go into that, and I'm not sure if that's playing a line in the faulty aspect of it. But I mean, we will address it and action it for you as many times as we need to, and the Corps of Engineers is a service to us as well. So we'll do that. I understand it's a inconvenience for you guys, but knowing that it is, that's primarily for y'all's safety. I would say for that recruiter, if there's a way, it might be that we need to disable that and he just gets a hard lock for that door. But if that continues to be an issue, just continue reporting it as best we can, and then we can have a harder conversation with the Corps of Engineers. Julius?
Major, they can request an upgrade at any time.
Okay.
If you got a facility and you want to replace that line, request an upgrade. Understand upgrades, like we get FY25 upgrades now.
Mm-hmm.
So it may take a few months for the upgrade to be done, but you can request to have that upgrade. Hey, I want this keypad replaced.
Absolutely.
And we can actually.
Yeah,
But in the meantime, every office should have a manual key in and out. Now, what happens is, the recruiter comes in, he doesn't even know there is a key, because they just used the keypad. You've been there 2 years, and then all of a sudden the key don't work. He said, I've been here 2 years, I never used it, because the other guy didn't tell him about it. And it's on the surface, and then sometimes they lose it, put it in pockets, no one knows where the key is. But once the Corps turn over facility to the Marines or the service, any service, replace the key is on the service's responsibility at one time. So you get one day, they give you a facility, you get manual keys, but if you lose that key or you need the key replaced because the recruiter got fired, you want to not have them in the building anymore, you want your manual key, then it's on the services to replace it. That's going out down, replace the manual key. So one thing we need to do, and we start, this could be an inspection for the following, is make sure every office have a manual key. So even if they may not use it for 3 years, but they have it in case they need backup.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
If you've got previous email traffic on that, Sergeant Major, if you could just resend that particularly if it has the address and the name of that location.
Yeah, I just hit them up. I told them to send me all the memorandum for the record of all the logs of all the issues they've had.
Yes.
And then I'll push it out.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we'll tackle it again. All right, thank you. There was a question over here, I think. Yes.
Yes, sir. So for our expansion,
Mhm.
we have an expansion coming up. Is the RS required to get the temporary facility, or who gets the temporary site for those Marines?
So that's something we action. So if we recognize that the expansion is going to leave a gap in like real estate for the Marines, it's part of the expansion request to also include a temp site. a temporary site for, while the expansion is being built out.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does, sir.
Okay. So it's not on the RS, like just when you communicate that an expansion is needed, I would encourage you guys just to confirm with us that it is being tracked. But that is a responsibility that sits on us to communicate and work with the Corps of Engineers so that y'all have that. And then we'll feed y'all the updates and the move-in dates and all that stuff once we have it.
Got it.
Anything else? All right, team. Hey, I appreciate your attention and your time. If you got any questions offline, feel free to hit me or any of my staff up. But again, we're here to serve you. Recognize that you guys are very busy and that facilities and logistics are not at the forefront of y'all's mind. We empathize with that. But I want to end with saying how important it is that when you consider that, operations can only go as far as you have the logistical support. So we're here to help, but sometimes we need you to tell us what that support looks like. Okay. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.